Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Oliver, Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Bravo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less. This is a podcast about the NBA with a focus on the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I'm joined as always by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, I'm going to ask you how you're doing, and I really hope the answer is better than the Phoenix Suns are doing.
I'm doing a little better, Max. My feelings are always tied to how the Suns are doing, so I definitely could be better. But I have a birthday tomorrow, and we're back on the pod after a little bit of a break, which is always fun for me. So I'm doing okay.
Oh, happy birthday. You didn't even tell me that it was your birthday.
Not yet. So, it's the big 31. We are both getting very old, Max.
We are. I'm not 31 until March. I actually didn't know that I was technically slightly younger than you, so I'm gonna wear that.
Yeah, you can take that.
Okay, so on this episode, we are gonna talk about the Phoenix Suns, who are going through a bit of a tough stretch here with the horrible losses and the Booker injury, but still some nice things we're seeing. So there's gonna be some positive in there too. After that, we're gonna do Did You Know? Then we're going to get into kind of a round the association thing. We're a general NBA podcast too, everyone should remember. So we're going to talk a little bit about the surprise teams, good and bad, some of the MVP early favorites, maybe some of the rookies who've impressed us or let us down. Although there really haven't been a lot of them who've let us down.
It's been a pretty great top 10, which I'm excited to talk about and rattle a few facts off there, Max.
Yeah, me too. But before that, let's do just a little bit of news. Not a ton of news to get to, but we should probably talk about kind of what's happened lately in Booker's injury. David, do you want to kind of recap for the listeners what's gone on lately?
Yeah, so we got brought back down to earth a little bit since our Dallas podcast and win for the opener there, Max. So a loss at Denver, 91-119, a loss to the Warriors, 103-123, and a loss to the Lakers, 113-131, Max. So 3 losses on the trot, which as the time of recording this pod sits us at 1-3, which is good for 14th in the West and last in our division, Max.
If you would have told me before the season started that the Suns would have a better record than OKC after 4 games, I would have been pretty happy with that.
Yeah, we maybe expected OKC to have a few more wins, but we're at least not last at the West just yet, Max.
Not yet. important caveat. But it kind of goes right into what I wanted to talk about, which is Booker. Booker obviously got injured in the LA game. He pulled his hamstring. Yep. I think it's a hamstring strain, right?
That's what they're calling it. They're officially calling it a strain and day-to-day for Booker, although they have listed him as out for the Memphis game, which will probably be happening around when people listen to this pod, Max.
And I think that makes sense because I think almost regardless, they're not going to play him in a back-to-back, even if they think he's ready. Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So it makes sense to declare him out for that game now anyway, and if he's possible to play in either game, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, him and Igor both said this morning that, they'll see how he feels. But yeah, I think particularly with the back-to-back, they're kind of slating him for maybe that second game, even if he's feeling good for the first one. But Anderson with a hip and Ayton with that ankle that seems to keep popping up on these injury reports, the other one's questionable for the next game as well, Max.
Yeah, what do you make of that? I know he rolled his ankle, I think it was like a practice after the first game, before the Denver game he was questionable, but did he roll it again? I didn't see that.
No, I definitely haven't seen anything on a court in a real life game. I think, the NBA is always very transparent with these injuries and news of injuries because of, fantasy and now gambling as well. So I think they're just being pretty transparent with that. I'd be very surprised if he didn't play, though.
Yep, I agree. I think he's going to play, and I hope he does because we might get into this, but I want to see that Jaren Jackson Jr. DeAndre Ayton matchup.
Yeah.
So let's get into the Suns topics. I think we're going to trade back and forth on some topics that are just at the top of our minds because we're watching every single minute of all these games, and we have thoughts and opinions. And the first thing I want to get into, David, is actually one Devin Booker, the man who's injured right now. I want to talk about a few things with him, some good, some bad. I'm going to start with probably the best thing about him so far, which has just been David, he's been an offensive superstar so far this season. There's really no other way to put it. The numbers he's putting up right now on the efficiency he's putting up put him in like a top 5 offensive guard category. With the caveat, the turnovers have got to come down. But he's shooting about 51% from the field, 39% from 3. All great. The free throw's a little low, but whatever. Small sample size. 28 a game, 7 assists. Just incredible production. And then if you look at the efficiency, the true shooting percentage is at 65%, which is just incredible for a player like him. 65%, if he's on that for the season, that's like an MVP kind of efficiency, true shooting meetup. So the assist percentage is way up. Everything's way up. The turnovers is the only thing keeping kind of the production overall down. But David, what do you think? It really looks like he's taking another leap.
It really has, and I think, not to gloat, but I think we all kind of saw it coming, Max. Anyone who watched him closely last year and the little help that he had, I think we saw, with Igor coming in and what he was going to do for him, with a big fella in the middle like Ayton kind of drawing crowds on rolls and things like that, and then the pieces that they've added around him, which mind you aren't doing all that great themselves, but they're obviously providing Booker with the space that he needs, and he on his own is also looked to have taken a pretty massive leap here, Max. I think some of those stats that you rattle off are pretty impressive. The turnovers I'm actually not worried about. I think most of them that we've seen in patches where he's picked up multiple turnovers in a short space of time is when he's been thrust into the kind of primary ball handler role with teams trapping him and things, and he's just made some bad decisions. So I'm not too worried about that. As you say, they've gone up just as well as every other positive stat of his has gone up at the same time. So, the efficiency is the big one here, Max, and I think you and I have noted kind of privately talking together, it's largely down to the fact that he's shooting basically from behind the three-point line and at the rim, and he's shooting just astronomical numbers at the rim. He's pretty much the same as last year from the three-point line, pretty small sample size, but, 38, 39%. But he's jumped up to almost 71% at the rim, Max, which I think is almost up 10 percentage points on how he was finishing last year. And I think the league average there is more like 62, 63. So that's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive. I think that the numbers bear out what you're saying in terms of just his aggression. His three-point attempt rate's way up. His free throw rate's way up, which is excellent because he's attacking the rim, finishing, like you said. And even with the turnovers, you look at like the advanced stats, the box score metrics, he's way up in that. If you're that high when you're basically leading the league in turnovers, that's incredible. And like you said, I'm not concerned about the turnovers so much because they came against the big turnover games came against Golden State, excellent perimeter defensive team. Clay was hounding them, and then Denver, which Denver's been the most aggressive defense in the league this year, the way they're playing on the perimeter, and I think I'm sure they kind of took Booker by surprise the way they were playing him. So I'm just really not concerned about that. It'll come down, and I hope and expect the rest of it to stay up. I do want to talk a little bit about something not as fun, David, unless you have a little more glowing to do about Booker.
Well, I think I know what you're getting at here. I would kind of say that he's kind of at phase 3 at the moment. Just to touch back on what we were talking about is, every year with Booker, people who haven't watched him closely have kind of knocked things, that he was just an inefficient scorer. He kind of proved that wrong, showed he could do a hell of a lot of other stuff on the court. Then he was just a volume guy on a bad team. And he picked up his percentages even last year, and now he's kind of gone up to another level this year. And probably the last thing for him, and what analysts are going to start sticking to now that he's kind of proven everything else wrong, is I'm guessing what you're going to bring up next, Max.
Well, the defense it's really, really bad, David. It's horrible. And listen, it's a real problem. It is, and it's a blemish. He gets attacked by opposing coaches. Are now at the Suns. So I don't know about you, David, but I've always thought that coaches didn't really scout the Suns, didn't care. It seems like this year they're a little more interested in it, and they're very much attacking Booker on defense consistently, and he has not been up to the challenge. Probably the most glaring example was the third quarter of the Dallas game where they just literally went at him like 5 possessions in a row and fouled him into the bench. But it's been happening every game, and they're going after him. He's getting into foul trouble. It's a problem, David.
Yeah, and we even saw it in that Dallas game. Igor managed to kind of get him out of there and then put him back in just at the right point in time. And, Dallas had their own foul trouble to deal with Doncic and a few other guys as well. So we got away that time. And then, he's been attacked a few other games after that, and it hasn't worked out so well. But, yeah, I think it's a great point. teams will always go at great offensive players, even if they're kind of average defenders, to try and take them out of the offensive game, take them out of the game altogether, or just wear them down a little bit. And Booker's well below average at the moment, and therefore is going to be attacked probably even more than your average player. And yeah, I think it's a good point by you, and I think it probably blends into a few other things that we'll see pop up in this conversation around, the point guard position and just the overall defense of the team as well, Max, which has, frankly been atrocious.
Yeah, it's been really bad. And compounding that a little bit too, I think this is maybe an undersold point, is that Booker is fouling a lot, not just because he's bad at defense, but I don't think he's adjusting well to whatever this new NBA rule is that's causing scoring to go nuts, in part because the refs are calling everything now. They're calling every little hook that you do, even on offense. Booker's getting these offensive fouls where, like, it's these little hooks he's doing, and he just can't be doing that. He's got to adjust his game where he's not getting these little chicken shit fouls.
Yeah, he needs to be careful on offense in particular, because you only get 6 fouls to waste. And as someone as bad as him, who's bound to pick up 2 or 3 on defense, just with laziness and guys getting past him and him fouling from behind, he can't be wasting any on charge calls or lazy hooks or anything like that, Max.
No, we cannot. Next thing, David, this is sort of like more of a meta point on the whole team, but since Booker's the best player, it falls on him. I'm worried about this team's leadership. For the past 3 years, this team, like, even when it has like a good game where it's being competitive for a while, like, one bad stretch will kill their spirit just immediately. They all look like, like the dog pooped on their lawns. They're just sad. Like, it's just they have no resolve, like, whatsoever. They give up so quickly. And the only reason I can think for why that's happening so consistently is that they don't have someone on the floor, a fiery leader who's keeping them engaged and keeping slapping them in the ass, be like, hey, dude, we're still in this game. Get back in the game. Get your head in it. Because, David, I don't know. What do you think? How many teams in the league do you see that are like this, that just completely give up?
Yeah, and it's been a constant theme for this team, even, with coaching changes and things like that, which make you worry a little more because, then it becomes about the players and the kind of core star players if it's a recurring theme, even, with a new coach like Igor. I think this is exactly why a guy like Patrick Beverley kept getting brought up by us and many others, Max, because it was his off-court and on-court stuff that we saw he would be a great match with the Suns, and not just what he was going to bring as a backcourt partner to Booker skills-wise. But, I've got in my note, Ariza and Anderson need to step up from this standpoint. Yep. Anderson's not a great defender. He didn't come to the team as a great defender. But in terms of keeping the guys focused and, trying to lead from the front, we can't expect it from Tyson anymore. Frankly, I'm not sure if it was ever there throughout his tenure. Booker's really the only one bright spot that people kind of lend to with Tyson's leadership. And to be perfectly honest, Booker may have already got to this point in his career without Tyson around. I don't think we can really put much of that on Tyson with the
No, I don't think I'm doing so.
Yeah. And, Jamal Crawford was kind of brought in to help the guards as a steadying influence as an old guy as well. But, from an on-court product, he's already showed some pretty poor signs of leadership. So whilst he's, teammate of the year, another great locker room guy, I think, as you said, we need to see it on the court from some of these guys. And at the moment, the ones that are being paid to do so aren't delivering, Max.
Yeah, you use the word steadying influence, which I do think the Suns are bringing guys like that in. That's not what they need. They don't need a steady influence. They need a fucking leader. And they don't have one. And I think Igor's a great coach. I do. Even despite, we'll get into it. I think he was not great the other night, but I think he's a great coach. But even you, the biggest Igor defender in the world, would admit that he's a kind of a meek, mild-mannered guy. He's not a loud leader, yeller guy. He's just not that. That's not his personality. The Suns don't have anybody like that. They don't have Draymond Green. They don't have Jimmy Butler. They need somebody who's just going to be, like, frankly, kind of an asshole. I don't know if you noticed this. I think several people tweeted about this, including me, but on one possession on offense, in the third quarter of the Lakers game, I think it was, Ayton made some mistake. I don't know exactly what it was, but it pissed Booker off, and Booker actually, as he almost never does, just started yelling at a teammate, yelling at Ayton.
Yep.
And Ayton, listen, this is anecdotal, this could be a coincidence, but Ayton had his best stretch of the season. Not the season, maybe of the season, but definitely of the game right after that. He was awesome. Listen, one instance, but I want to see so much more of that. And Devin Booker could do that on offense. He can be the fiery, yelling leader on offense. He can't be that on defense because, frankly, if Booker's yelling at me on defense, I'll just roll my eyes at him because he's the worst defender on the team. But they need someone somewhere to just be that guy who's yelling at him, keeping him in line. He needs to command respect. It can't be someone who sucks. And I don't know if that guy's on the roster. Frankly, I don't know how they're going to find him.
Yeah, I don't think that guy is on the roster at the moment, Max. Just touching back on Igor, I did like some of his quotes after the last loss around accountability and if things are getting away on the court, then that's kind of on the coaches. So, Igor's not going to shy away from that. I think he is one to take on that responsibility. As you said, he's not a Tibbs going to, yell at the guys from the bench sort of coach, but I think he sees what we're seeing and is putting it on the coaches to make sure that, that's something that improves. But the easiest way for me to define it is, around that steadying influence mark and the point that you're making kind of on the court. So I think Ariza, Anderson, even Jamal Crawford, I think they're all guys that are going to provide value after the losses that we've had and make sure that the guys are back up for the next game and, forgetting the things in the past and focusing moving forward. But I think, as you said, in the moment when things are going wrong and somebody leading from the front, we're definitely lacking that guy on the court at the moment. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure that there's a guy on the roster that's, not playing or something at the moment that is going to be able to provide that. So that's probably going to have to come from the outside, and whether it comes with a point guard trade or another move down the track, it's definitely something to watch, Max.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think that's exactly on point. I hate to use war analogies because it's sports and it's kind of silly and almost like wrong to use war analogies, but when you got your guys in the bunker and they're shell shocked because they're gotten shot at and they're getting offensive on them, you need someone just to just rattle everyone back into their cages. And they just don't have someone like that right now. They have no resolve. They totally fall out of it when things go rough. And I agree with you. It's not on the roster now. I mean, it's almost like another reason to trade for Jimmy Butler, because you know what Jimmy Butler would do? He would do exactly what we're talking about. It's tough. I think it's going to be a problem with this team all season because there's not a lot of obvious solutions. And it's depressing me, so maybe we should just move on.
I don't want to depress you some more, Max, but it probably flows nicely into my kind of big first question, and that is, what is the defensive identity of this team? So we have noticed a couple of stretches, and it comes off the back of your point that you've just made, where we've kind of lost the last 3 games in 5-minute stretches on the court. For the rest of the game, we've kind of been competitive, and you can look into that as the game's already being run and won, and therefore the opposition isn't exactly playing to their best either. But particularly the last Lakers game, we did the video on our Twitter account around energy and kind of losing that game in a 6-minute stretch in the second quarter. So the thing that I'm looking out for, Max, is we saw a lot of clips and talk and stuff from preseason around a team that was going to be switching a lot, and we just haven't seen that quite a lot from the team on the court. And I'm not sure if that's the coaches thinking that they're not quite ready, or personnel wise, particularly in the starting 5, it's probably not there to do that. But I have noticed in very small stints, Max, when we have been playing a switchy D, it's probably been our best defensive spurts, as I said, in very short parts of the game. Have you kind of noticed that in some of our losses?
Yeah, I have. It has come at times, but man, it's overwhelmed by the lapses. And the thing that's bothering me the most, like, I know they're not good on defense. Obviously, they don't have the personnel for it. Ayton doesn't know what he's doing on that end yet. He shows flashes, but generally doesn't know what he's doing on that end. But the thing is, like, they're not even trying, especially transition defense. It's just like, how are you not getting back on transition defense? It's like an Earl Watson team. And I can't imagine that Igor's not telling them to get back on transition defense. Of course he is. Like, I have enough faith in Igor to think that, but, like, I don't know why they're not doing it. It's shocking to me, frankly. I almost am at a loss for words on it. I don't understand what's going on, David.
Yeah, I think, on the Igor point, not to keep giving him a pass here, but there's only so many things you can focus on as a coach. And, energy and getting back on defense really shouldn't be something that he needs to ram home with the players or feel like he should need to. But, kind of touching off your last point, I've got some facts from the 3 losses for you here, Max. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Against the Nuggets, 62 points in the paint, 33 fast break points.
Jesus.
Against the Warriors, 48 points in the paint, 34 fast break points. Against the Lakers, 68 points in the paint and 27 fast break points, Max. That's all while teams from 3 have actually shot at or below the average of around 35% against us. So we're doing a decent job. I think we're kind of 10th in the league or something like that, around 3-point percentage from our opposition. But, you know, if you want to look at the defense, it's really all about us just letting teams walk up and down the court and walk right through us. And, you know, my main note for that, Max, which we've kind of touched on already a little bit, is there's basically one good defender in the starting lineup, and that's Ariza. And he's probably had one good game so far for us. So when that's your starting unit, and you've got a rookie anchoring that, and, you know, your star player, as we've already touched on, is kind of notoriously bad on defense, effort can only get you so far, and they're not even giving the effort at the moment, Max.
I mean, totally. I fully agree with you that the starting lineup is just not going to play defense, and the problem is when you have that lineup, like, they have a hard time getting to a lineup that can play defense.
Yep.
There's not a lot of lineups they have that can do it, but particularly when you start that way, you're setting yourself up for you know, a rotation system that's not going to have defensive lineups in it. Also, when you're playing Jamal Crawford for, like, you know, 20 minutes a fucking game, you're not going to play very good defense because he's like the worst, because you're going to play Booker for 35, so that's just going to be awful. You're not playing Melton, so I don't want to get into that yet, because that's another point I want to get into, but generally, yes, I agree. I mean, the defense is atrocious. I don't see how it's going to get better with this personnel. They're going to have to fire Ryan Anderson into the sun. Maybe that would help, but short of that, I mean, I don't know, man. It's hard for me to even, like, make a coherent point on the defense, because it's just all so bad that, like, you can just criticize all of it.
Yeah, but, you know, I guess my one point that I wanted to make is, as bad as it has looked, it really kind of boils down to the points in the paint and fast break stuff. We're doing some okay things in other places on defense, and if they can just improve the effort a little bit and tighten things up a little more, and with how well the offense is going with, you know, particularly Booker and Ayton on the court, they may actually see themselves in some more games and avoid some of these blowouts, Max, because as far as one stat goes, they're all boiling down to that at the moment. Okay,
let's move on to sort of a related point, and I'm not going to go on an extended rant here just because we've kind of already been ranting. Igor's rotations have come under fire by many on Twitter, including me. You're Igor's number one defender, number one fan. I'm going to give you the floor before I go after it. Defend his rotations, David.
First thing I'll say is something's definitely off, Max. I'm just not at panic mode 4 games into the season, just like I'm not with a lot of these things that we're bringing up. I think it's right to bring a lot of these negatives up, but you know, something that I'm probably going to harp on a lot on this pod early on, and a lot on Twitter and conversations with Suns fans, is I think this team's just behind. I think the preseason was interrupted with a new coach. NBA teams don't really get a lot of time with their players before the season starts anyway. The Booker injury didn't help. The new Booker injury is probably not going to help, and the point guard situation certainly doesn't help. But I personally thought Igor would ride with energy a little bit more. He seems to have stuck to a more traditional rotation and kind of the minutes that he's locked into pre-game, which is, I think, been a little bit frustrating to see, particularly when, you know, games aren't going the way that you know, we expect them to. It would be nice to see Igor change things up a little bit. The one thing, I mean, Anderson's one that's been criticized obviously quite a lot. The only note that I have there is they did get him to reduce his contract, and we just don't know what has been kind of promised or spoken about there. I'd like to see them try and play him a little bit more as a backup 5, Max, because if, you know, the defense isn't great, particularly, you know, when in the second unit, and the options behind Ayton, which is another thing that we can probably get into, are looking pretty bad as well now. Maybe another way to get guys like Mikal Bridges and stuff on the court and play a little bit more switchy stuff is to play Anderson at the 5, if you have to play him, because other than maybe Igor just trying to play him into form, he definitely hasn't deserved his minutes. But what's the things that are really bothering you with the rotation, Max?
What will we ever do without Tyson Chandler, though? What's bothering me the most, and I get that he's trying to stabilize the team. This team has been constantly shifting out its starting lineup and lineups, whatever, all for the past 3 years. And I think part of this idea here is we just want to get some stability. I get it. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is how we're at the end of the second quarter and Anderson and Crawford have played significantly more than TJ Warren. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. TJ Warren's had an amazing start to the season. On this team, he qualifies as a veteran. What the hell? Why is he not playing more? Why is he at 6 minutes with 3 minutes left in the second quarter? Why isn't he playing significantly? Doesn't make sense to me. The Mikal thing, I guess it makes sense. Igor said he doesn't want to throw him to the wolves or whatever.
Yep.
We're not asking you to start him, Igor. Just fucking play him. He didn't play in the first half. Why? It doesn't make sense to me. Why is Jamal Crawford playing double-digit minutes when he can't play defense and sucks at everything? Honestly, sucks at everything. He made one crazy shot at the end of the first quarter, but he's bad. Mikal Bridges is the one guy who's shown some spark on both ends on your team. He's the future, as Igor said, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to hold him back when he's better already. It makes sense to me to hold him back if he's not better already, but David, he's better already. And the other thing I'll get into before I end this rant and let you go, the second quarter, even aside from who's playing, the rotations it didn't make sense the whole way through. There were lineups without shooting, there were lineups without playmaking, and there were lineups that just couldn't defend at all. And there were lineups that mixed all of them together. It's just you need to have identities with your lineups. You can't just throw lineups out there that don't make any sense at all on any end of the court. And I felt like that's what was happening in the second quarter. And I think that's why the game got out of hand, because it was just, by the time they finally got to that Booker, Josh Jackson, Ariza, Ayton, and I can't remember the fourth guy lineup, but it was kind of like one of their better lineups. It was out of reach already. Yeah,
I think all good points by you, Max. And not to repeat myself, but all I would say is that we're at game 4, and we also need to remember that Igor's a rookie coach.
Totally.
I don't want to give him a pass all the time, and I certainly won't be giving him a pass in 20 games' time if things like these are still happening and Bridges is continually showing in very limited minutes that he deserves to be out there, but they're still not playing him. So I'm just not overreacting at this point. I definitely get the frustration. I myself have been frustrated in games, watching games, but there's a lot going on. There's probably a lot going on that we aren't aware of, and that's why it's also hard to judge. I think Josh Jackson's play has kind of been the most frustrating thing and made it very hard to kind of set these rotations. TJ Warren may be playing better than everyone expected, and therefore the time that he should be deserving on the court it isn't what they kind of initially had slotted in for him.
So wait, hold on. Let me interrupt in there. What do you think about Igor playing Anderson and Crawford significantly more than TJ in the first half of the Lakers game? Is there any defense of that, or do you think that's just a rookie mistake?
I think it was just a rookie mistake, and I'm sure he would admit to that if you kind of ran back the film with him and what's going on there. I think we've seen with TJ, they're playing him mostly as a backup 4, essentially. That's why we're not seeing guys like Dragon Bender. And I think, Jamal Crawford, I think the signing was clearly for playmaking in the second unit, whether you agree with that or not. I definitely don't agree with him playing, significant minutes next to guys like Booker, because then it's even worse defense than what we're seeing in the starting unit. And sometimes your second unit should be kind of the antithesis of what you've got going on in your starting unit. So, yeah, I don't love major minutes for Jamal Crawford, even though I haven't been too critical of anything that he's done yet, other than highlighting that he's not bringing energy just like everyone else isn't at the moment. But I think it's definitely something worth watching and something that we should continue to probably touch on the pod, and hopefully something that continues to improve. Max and Igor can start to work out this rotation, but probably a nice segue into what we're going to do about point guard here, Max, because I think a lot of it, again, not to give Igor a pass, stems from that. I think he's trying to work on the fly with how he wants to play, and he doesn't have great playmaking options in either unit, and that's kind of forcing him out of rotations that he'd probably typically like to play, because I think with Ayton, a point guard, and Booker, it's a lot easier than to plug in shooters on the wings as he would like, and maybe some more defensive guys as well, and we may see more of guys like Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, obviously the point guard play is a huge thing. Cannon's not been like awful. He's not providing what they need there. They need someone who's good for this team. This team, more than most teams, needs a good point guard, and Cannon is providing, I don't know, what would you say, like below average backup point guard level play, maybe?
Yeah, and here's something, my notes on Cannon, he's not a true point guard. He's even been categorized as a shooting guard earlier in his career. So just by size virtue, he's kind of classed as a point guard, particularly on this team. But he's giving us no defense, Max, next to our worst defensive player in Devin Booker in the backcourt. He's 38% from the field, 30% from three, and he is currently 4th in assists in our starting lineup. So my kind of question there is, Mac, is like, I'm not really sure what he's bringing to the team. I get that there's not great playmaking options elsewhere, and that's obviously what Igor wants. But if that kind of continues and he's not bringing a certain trait to the starting lineup, I think something has to give, Max.
I guess he's not like just outright pooping his pants on the court. He's not just throwing the ball to the other team. I guess that's what he's giving us. He's not. You're right. He's not doing anything.
He's a steadying influence out there, maybe, and I guess the guy that Igor feels he can count on the most to run the offense.
We might have to title this podcast episode "Steadying Influence."
Yeah, but I think it's just maybe he's got the best knowledge of the playbook, and that's what Igor's running with at the moment. But with Booker's injury, he's going to miss maybe a couple of games. Probably going to mean that Jackson, if we follow the preseason form line, is going to be back in. And I'm really hoping we see Jackson's chemistry with Ayton come to the fore again like we saw in the preseason. Maybe play some, really stingy defense. And, I'd like to see Jackson force his way into the starting lineup. If there's not a move coming for a point guard, if we have to wait to December 15 when more guys can be traded, or we're just getting offered absolute overpays at the moment and they just can't make a move, I think that's the move that might need to be made, Max.
David, you just stole all my thunder. That's what I was going to say. If I were the coach of the Phoenix Suns, when Booker's ready to go, I'm putting him back in the lineup and I'm keeping Josh Jackson there. Because I think that it's the best thing going forward, not only for the team, but definitely for Josh Jackson. I think they've looked their best. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, if you disagree, but they've looked their best, I think, with Booker and Josh Jackson as the guards. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think, we've touched on it a lot. Jackson looks his best when he's with...
Absolutely.
Better talent on the floor.
Yeah, he gets those open shots, and he's not forced to do too much. Because when he's forced to do too much, he's awful. Yep. He turns the ball over constantly. He tries these stupid drives that don't make any sense. But when he's with Booker, and especially if he started the game, so I think it'd be even better if he started the game, because if he starts and say it's Booker, Josh, Ariza, we'll put Anderson there for now. Although I'd like that change to be made as well, and then Ayton at the center. Like, Josh is not going to be with a 30% usage in that lineup. He's just not. He's going to be the third or fourth option. And I think that's exactly what he needs to be right now. He needs to learn what he can and can't do. He needs to be in a smaller role where he doesn't have the green light to do everything. He needs to just play off Booker and Ayton. He needs Booker and Ayton to do their pick and roll thing or whatever they're going to do, and he sits in the corner. Because one of the underrated things about Josh Jackson so far, David, his 3-point shot when he's like open and passed to actually looks pretty good. I think it's better. He just doesn't get to it enough.
Yeah, as far as he's clearly practiced as a set shot, which is what he should be getting in a lineup like that. Not having to come off the dribble so much, not having to rush, just shoot when you're open. And I think on the small sample size we've seen so far, he's doing a pretty good job of that. It's just all the other stuff that's not looking so good. But, the flow-on effect of a move like that, whether it is replacing Kanan in the starting lineup with a point guard that we bring in via a trade, or more of a short-term option, someone like Josh Jackson, I think it just helps the team exponentially. Kanan, as we've said, is probably great as a backup point guard on this team. He'd be a good guy in that second unit to get everybody the shots that they need and kind of run the offense and not let things get out of hand when our bench unit is in there. I think it helps Booker with what we've discussed with him, whether it's defensively or just another playmaking guy on the court. It helps Ayton. We haven't really seen much pick and roll with Ayton, with him finishing at the basket. We've seen a lot of Ayton diving to the rim and guys missing him, and the pass kind of going out to the wings for a 3-point shot. So, guys aren't catching him as much as they probably should have, and Jackson certainly did find him in the preseason, so it helps that. And, I just think that a change at the point guard position could actually help a lot of these other things that we're talking about. I think it helps rotations because I think it makes things simpler for Igor trying to find guys minutes. And I think it probably helps the defense because, as you said, whether it's Anderson sliding up to the 5 or Ayton at the 5, and then, TJ comes in for Anderson, maybe Mikal comes in for Ariza, then all of a sudden you've got Jackson, Booker, Bridges, Warren all on the court, and you can play more of a switchy defense, which...
David, I want to see that lineup so badly.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, Max, I think it all stems not, again, to give Igor a pass here, because he's the one that has to make this change himself anyway, but I think it really stems from this point guard situation and this playmaking situation, particularly in the second unit, and that's why he's struggling to find minutes for guys like Bridges, because he's just trying to deal with too many problems at once, Max.
2 points I want to make building off of that, because I agree with everything you just said. That was all well stated. I just want to add to it, and that's, one, you brought up Jackson and Ayton in the preseason, which is one of the top bright flashes that we saw. Imagine those two getting to do their thing when they also have Devin Booker on the court, who's going to draw so much attention from the defense. Like, I know Josh Jackson's kind of bad sometimes, but you have to pay attention to him because he's kind of a freak athlete for his size, a sort of freak ball handling ability. Mm-hmm. So even when he's like missing a lot, driving to the rim, you have to account for him. When you get to a certain amount of you have to account for this guy on the court, like, it becomes hard to defend a team. It's hard to defend Booker, Ayton, and Jackson on the court. It just is. They're freaks, kind of. You know what I mean? So I think that would just kind of overwhelm things. And the other point I wanted to make is that if you take Jackson off the second unit and put him in the starting lineup, you're kind of just giving the second unit to TJ, which I think he has totally earned. I think it's time for TJ to have like his own second unit that he's sort of like the star of. I think that's perfect for him at this point. I think it's exactly where he should be, and it just makes all the sense in the world to me, David.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, another note that I've got with getting Warren and Jackson both time is that maybe eventually one of those guys are traded, and that's why Bridges is sitting on the pine at the moment. Igor did say that Bridges is the future. If you are looking to make a move for a decent point guard and are going to have to give a decent player back, maybe that's why we're still seeing quite a bit of both TJ and Josh in the second unit together. And I think Igor's really struggled to plug Bridges in with those two guys at the same time. So, yeah, I think Jackson being in the starting lineup, then giving the second unit to TJ, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to find Bridges minutes on the wing as well, Max.
God, that would be hilarious if they finally traded TJ when he was actually good. That's most of what I got, David. Unless you got something else, I just want to do one more thing, one more kind of stupid thing, but if you have something else, you do it first.
I just want to end on a nice note here. We've kind of gone on a bit of a rant with a lot of negatives, and rightly so. I think we're not going to be kind of always pumping the guys up, particularly in a week where we've had 3 blowout losses. But we touched on Booker at the start, most of which was positive, and how much he and Igor have kind of maximized his potential with the way that he's going. And I just wanted to say, what Igor is doing with Ayton through 4 games is pretty ridiculous. And what Ayton is doing himself also. He's shooting 62% from the field, 10.8 rebounds, Max, and something I don't think either of us saw coming. He's got 3.8 assists a game, and the team's really running through him in the high post. And they're doing a lot of cross-screening down low, which is something I noted with Igor's system, and getting Ayton buckets right at the rim, where he doesn't need to back down in the post or anything like that. He just turns and finishes on guys. And one dunk in the Lakers game I really enjoyed was where he was actually quite aggressive. It was probably the first time we'd seen him, more try and tear the rim down rather than just put the ball softly through the net, as we've discussed on his touch before. So that was good to see, and I just hope we see some more pick and roll, as we just touched on before, with maybe a point guard change, Max.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like the way Igor's using Ayton. I think that there's been a lot of attention paid to some of his defensive recognition problems, which are obviously there, but we knew were there. They were there in college. We expected it. I think people, listen, you're not making a great point anymore if you're just hammering that every single day, Nate Duncan. We get it. His offense, it's been cool. It's been good. I like to see him be a little more physical. I always make that criticism. But overall, I mean, you can't argue the production. He's been incredibly productive, and that matters. I like what I've seen at Ayton so far. And it's funny, this actually dovetails nicely into my stupid thing I was going to bring up, David. I know what Igor's doing. I get the building him up slowly. I get all of it. I just really want to see him shoot 3-pointers, David.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. There was a couple of moments in the last game, I think, where, maybe you could kind of see it in his mind. He almost wanted to take it because the ball just ended up with him late in the shot clock, and he kind of looked at the rim and then, made sure he found his guard on a curl or something like that. But, I think you can see that he's being suppressed from doing that, Max.
Mm-hmm. And at some point, they're going to have him do that, obviously, because that's what's going to make him, part of his offensive crazy value is he's going to shoot 3 as well. I feel pretty confident about that with his touch. But I also understand bringing him in slowly on that. They're trying to teach him how to be a big right now. But, man, I can't wait till Ayton's hitting those trailing threes on fast breaks and stuff. That's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, and it is a feature of the way Igor likes to play. He likes both his 4 and his 5, if they can, to trail the play. One guy running the rim, coming back up to the high post, and whoever the other guy is, whether it's the 4 or the 5, kind of trailing the play as a spacing threat. So I think we may see that. It just might not be in his rookie year, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's okay. I get it. Bring him along slowly. It's fine. But David, let's move on. We're running a little long here. Let's go to Did You Know?
Sounds good, Max. For Did You Know this week, I'm going to go with the Suns' most recent signing, and a guy who I suspect is going to come up maybe negatively a little bit on our podcast. Of course, I am talking about Jamal Crawford. Or should I say, did you know his real first name is in fact Aaron, Max?
I did not know that.
Whilst I'm willing to admit there is a far greater chance I'm on your side of the fence with Jamal by the end of the season, I'm going to choose to be positive about our new combo guard for now. So Max, did you know Phoenix is Crawford's 8th NBA team since being drafted in 2000? And by his count, Igor is his 19th NBA coach in that time. I know you've seen a bit of time on his basketball reference page recently, Max, so I won't make you name his coaches, but can you name any and all of the teams that he has been on?
Jesus, I mean, no, but I'll try. So he was on New York for a long time.
There's one.
He's on the Clippers. He's
2.
on the Wolves.
There's 3.
He's on the Bulls, was he?
That was his first team. That's 4.
Oh, God. Jamal Crawford. He's been on a lot of freaking teams.
Let's just jump into it. That's not bad. You got 50%.
I'll take it.
We're always going for 50% field goal on this pod. So he was drafted by Cleveland, actually, in 2000 as a 6'5 guard from Michigan with the 8th overall pick, but they don't count as a team because he was automatically traded to Chicago, as you mentioned. He also played on the Knicks after that, before going to the Golden State Warriors in 2009, Max. He only played 54 games there. Probably the only team that you maybe should have gotten after that is then the Atlanta Hawks, where he won his first 6th man award. He then went to Portland for a short stint in 2012, and then the Clippers, as you mentioned, with 2 more 6th man awards before the Wolves last year. So that's 18 seasons, Max, and Jamal has been pretty damn durable too. He's 38. By my count, he's played 1,262 of a possible 1,460 games. That's 86%, or an average of 70 games over 18 seasons, Max. So we get it by now. Crawford is old.
Yeah.
But looking at his ties to the Suns, we can show just how old he is. As we know, Coach Igor was hired by the Suns this offseason with 18 years experience in the NBA. He started with the Clippers in 2000, the same year that Jamal Crawford entered the league, Max. Crawford debuted on the 31st of October 2000. Devin Booker just turned 4 years old then, and 5 other Suns players on the team were even younger. Crawford and Chandler became teammates on the Bulls when Chandler was drafted in Jamal's 2nd NBA season. Crawford had completed 5 seasons and was now on the Knicks when Trevor Ariza became a rookie in New York. And then there's playoffs, Max. Before joining the Clippers, Crawford only played 23 playoff games in 12 NBA seasons. and didn't make the playoffs until his 10th NBA season. That's a drought that actually beats the Suns' own current playoff drought, Max. Pretty impressive.
Or depressing.
Or depressing. For a guy with 1,262 career games, as I said, but knowing he had a pretty poor playoff record until recently, Max, how many games would you guess he's played in the playoffs overall?
Oh, man, I don't know, like 40?
He's played 74, and they were all over the age of 29. Huh. The Suns have 11 players under the age of 29 currently on the roster, and they combined for 23 seasons experience compared to Jamal Crawford's 18. That's 11 players with 23 seasons compared to Jamal on his own with 18. Anyway, Max, you'd think this might be Jamal's last season in the NBA, and more than likely won't include the playoffs, unfortunately for us. So that'll be 8 playoff seasons out of 19 total. You'd also think it's even more unlikely that Jamal makes the All-Star game, Max, which is sad for 2 reasons. Firstly, he recently proclaimed there was an extension to his signature crossover that he was saving for an All-Star game, and therefore we'll never get to see that live. And number 2, Jamal needs just 296 points this season with the Suns, or somebody else, and he will become the guy with the most career NBA points to not make an All-Star game. And of course, in true Did You Know fashion, Max, he will replace another ex-Sun and another ex-Did You Know member, Eddie Johnson, with that record. So that's that, Max, and I'm excited to jump into some around the association stuff and talk about some teams who aren't the Phoenix Suns.
I was impressed almost that entire time until you mentioned the possibility that he could break that record with somebody else. Yeah, so let's jump into the league-wide NBA talk. I think my first note here, David, I want to talk about is just kind of how fun the MVP race is shaping up. Listen, it's 4 games in, but Steph Curry has decided to try this season, which is really fun. Nikola Jokic is a world beater. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I picked, is, the Bucks are insane. He's awesome. Anthony Davis, the Pelicans are insane. He's awesome. David, I think we're going to have a really, really fun MVP race this year.
Yeah, I agree. There's a couple of surprises that have come out. My pick in LeBron James is not looking great 4 games into the season, but, maybe things will pick up there. I think your pick in Giannis is looking very, very good. And it's always good to have a couple of surprises in there. I think everyone expected Jokic to have a good year, but he has just come out flaming hot. And Steph Curry is kind of reminding everyone who Steph Curry is.
I love it. I'm so happy he's doing it. One of the things that was the biggest bummer about Kevin Durant going there is it kind of neutered Steph Curry, at least the MVP level Steph Curry that we were used to, and it seems like he's kind of getting back to that now, which it's just so fun. He's one of our most fun players.
Yeah, it's obviously, they've still won titles, but it's taken them all a while to kind of adjust to each other, and Steph's just reminding everyone the player he is, and ironically, it might be on the eve of Durant leaving the Warriors maybe next season, Max, and we'll get a couple more, hopefully, prime seasons out of Steph Curry just yet. But who else has surprised you, Max? I've got a couple of teams here, but I'd like to hear from you. What's your good and your bad here so far in the East and the West?
So I think the most surprising teams have been, to me, in the West, it's been the Nuggets. I thought they were going to be really good, but I've been kind of shocked by how good they've been defensively.
Yep.
And also how good they've been with Gary Harris has sort of looked kind of taking a leapish, but Jamal Murray, who I picked as the most improved player in the league, he's been fine, but he hasn't been ridiculous. And I think if you asked me if the Nuggets were really awesome to start, I would have said, it's probably because Jamal Murray broke out.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. Millsap's not even playing that well, so maybe that strengthens Jokic's MVP candidacy even more, because the other note that I have on Denver is there's not a lot of depth there either, Max. That's kind of my biggest worry for them going forward. So they've started red hot, as have the Pelicans in the West, I think, and Toronto, probably one of my picks that is looking the best so far, is pretty red hot as well.
Yeah, Toronto looks awesome. Kawhi it looks like he hasn't missed a beat, and I think that I can't remember which one, but it was either Brendan Clean or Evan Sidery on Lockdown when I was guesting picked Kawhi as MVP.
Yep.
And I shouldn't have left him out because he's definitely he's on that list. Another team I'll mention, and I guess another MVP candidate, although I think they'll calm down, is the Detroit Pistons. and Blake Griffin.
Yep.
They've been awesome. They've been lighting the league on fire. They've had a really easy schedule. But Blake, I mean, he had that 50-point game or whatever it was against the Sixers, and yeah, he looks awesome.
It's pretty hard to trust them and Blake, health-wise as well. So that's definitely a watch this space one. Both Curry and Blake are on my top fantasy team at the moment, so I'm definitely rooting for both of them
fantasy team.
to keep going the way that they've been going. But
weren't you upset about paying too much for Steph?
I was. It's looking a little better, and if you combine him and the $8 that I paid for Blake, it's looking pretty good as a dual purchase, Max.
Yeah, not bad.
But the Bucks ball movement is exactly what we expected it. Giannis is exactly what we expected it, and they've currently scorching the Wolves as we record this, and on an unbeaten run so far, I believe, Max.
Yeah, you asked for surprises, which is why I didn't bring them up, because to toot my own horn here, I thought they were going to be extremely good.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get to OKC soon enough, so my horn will be untooted. But, yeah, I mean, they're awesome. Bud changed them, like kind of like a lot of people thought it was going to happen. I mean, they had horrible coaching, and now they have great coaching, and Giannis is a freak. It doesn't really surprise me. The Pelicans thing, also, I kind of thought they were going to be good. I would say Elfrid Payton surprised me a bit. He's been better than expected. I guess, I think it's kind of it's a reminder to everybody that you can't judge players always when they're on horrible, awful teams. Sometimes it's just hard to play with players who suck when you're playing against great players. So some players need to be with better players, and I think Elfrid Payton's one of them. And
fit as well, Max. Fit is obviously a massive thing in the NBA, and people kind of were skeptical about whether he'd just be able to slide into that Rondo role and do the same thing for the Pelicans, but so far so good there. And the Pelicans are blowing teams out. Mm-hmm. I think they're in a tough one today, but they kind of got a plus 15-point differential, which is way higher than anyone else in the West, and I think tops the league overall as well. So
yeah, they're about to lose to the Nets at home, and the Nets will go 3-2 with this win in New Orleans. That's a pretty big surprise.
That is a surprise. I love the Nets. They just play hard. Going back to the Phoenix discussion around effort and things, I think that's a classic case of a team that just gets the most out of them. And one thing I'll touch on with the Nets, I didn't plan to bring it up, but I've been tracking Ayton as far as contesting shots and box outs and things, the things that the NBA classes as the hustle stats that they've been tracking for just a couple of seasons now. And Jarrett Allen is contesting the most shots in the NBA at the moment, Max.
It's something that would have surprised me before the season for sure. It doesn't surprise me after what I've seen so far. He's been freaking awesome, dude.
And can I toot my own horn on LeVert and my most improved
yes, you
pick
can.
There? He's 21 points per game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal, Max. So he is right on track for at least being in the conversation if he keeps this up.
Yeah, I think he's their best player right now. Tonight he's not having a great game, but whatever. Russell is. So maybe Russell's their best player. But I think Karis LeVert's been their best player so far, and that's definitely, you should toot your horn over that. That's
I don't think I'll get too many right, but that one might save me. What about some bad, Max?
Speaking of not getting things right, David, the OKC Thunder are 0-4. I'm actually not ready to say that I'm wrong about this at all. I think that, of course, the first 2 games were without Westbrook. They lost a tough one at home last night where they controlled the game against Boston and just sort of gave it up at the end. They lost a really bad loss to the Kings. It was Westbrook's first game back. I don't know. It's 4 games. I'm pretty sure the Dallas team in 2007 that went, I think it was 67-15, Dirk's MVP year, they started off like 0-4. So it happens sometimes. I still believe in OKC, but it has not been a good start, David.
Well, there's a bit of history to look back on and maybe a bit of hope for OKC. I'm definitely not going to ram you too hard on this one because I think it could come back to bite me. They're a very talented team. And guess who they get to play next, Max?
I'm guessing because it's on Sunday, it's the Phoenix Suns.
That's correct. So we get another team.
That's a good medicine. That's some good medicine for them.
But, my biggest thing with them is they're still starting Ferguson at the 2. And they're playing major minutes with Diallo as well, who's probably fared a little bit better than Ferguson. But just depth-wise and kind of overall talent-wise, there's some signs there that they might not be as good as what we expected. But yeah, I'm definitely not ruling them out just yet.
The Roberson injury was tough on them. It almost feels like they need to make a trade because, yeah, obviously it's untenable to start Terrence Ferguson. That dude's terrible, so they got to figure something out. David, how do you feel about some of the underperforming East teams? Philadelphia hasn't been kind of what people thought they might be. They've been a little bit sketchy. I'd say Boston also, although they got a nice win last night, their offense has been terrible until I mean, I don't know if this is still the case, but they had the worst offense in the league for a while. Are you worried about these teams, or do you think it's just early season stuff?
I'm not worried about Boston. They are far and away the best defensive team in the league at the moment, which is always going to help when you're struggling on offense. And, we noted on our preview pods that, they had quite a bit to work out there with slotting Irving and Hayward back into that lineup. So Brad Stevens will work that out, and at the moment they're just kind of resting on their defense, which I think is fine. Philly, I don't know what's going on there. The stuff that they're stuffing around with Markelle Fultz is just silly as far as I'm concerned. JJ Redick was a great fit and a great starter for them last year, and they should have stayed with that, in my opinion.
Don't say anything like that on Twitter, man. You think Suns fans are defensive about our team? Oh my God. Say anything about Markelle Fultz, and you'll just get fucking attacked.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay off with that take, and I'm sure not too many Philly fans listen to this pod, so I should be safe, Max. But the Cavs look as awful as we kind of expected, so maybe they'll start a fire sale soon around December 15 and really tank for that protected pick to make sure they keep it. Probably my biggest worry at the moment is my prediction around the Wizards. They just look gross. Howard, I don't think, has played yet for them. And, yeah, things do not look good in DC, Max.
I saw someone suggest that there might be a Pistons trading for John Wall thing coming, and I totally see that happening. That just makes so much sense.
That definitely seems like something that it could definitely happen in the East.
The last team I'll touch on that's underperforming, not a surprise to me. I said they probably would. Although, to be fair, I didn't predict Chris Paul getting suspended, but the Rockets are out of the gate pretty slow. They're currently losing to the Clippers by 25 points.
Wow.
They're in trouble, man. Yeah, they're not very good right now. Harden's not playing tonight, I don't think, but still, man, there's a reason why they're trying to trade 4 first-round picks for Jimmy Butler.
Exactly.
They're not very good.
Exactly, and I think there's a reason that's been leaked as well to see if Minnesota can get. I think it was reported that the Heat kind of resurfaced again on the back of that rumor, so particularly with how the Wolves have gone today as well, we may be on the eve of finally seeing a Jimmy Butler trade. And as far as a landing spot, I kind of want to see him go to Houston, to be honest, Max. Miami will just be kind of a bit, meh. And Houston swinging for the fences and him, winding up in the West on that team would at least be more interesting from a narrative standpoint, I think.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Want to see it? I think a Houston playoff series with Golden State, if Jimmy Butler's involved, would be really, really fun.
Yes.
And I'm all in on that. Let's move on though to the rookies real quick. We're running long, so let's move to the rookies. I mean, as we said earlier, they've all been pretty good. David, what are your major takeaways?
I've got something here for you, Max, and we'll start with it and maybe flow on from there really quickly. So if we just look at the top 10, 5 of the top 10 are currently starting for their teams. That's DeAndre Ayton, Luka Doncic, JJJ, which was kind of forced by an injury, but would have happened eventually anyway. Trae Young with the Hawks, and Carter Jr. with the Bulls is starting at center with a very bad defensive, talking about the Suns' bad defensive starting 5. He has to put up with some pretty horrible defenders around him in Chicago. But I got a question for you here, Max. How many may we see starting by the end of the year? So I'll run through the other 5 and think of their situations and let me know whether you think they might be starters also, which would mean by the end of the year, the entire top 10 is starting on their team. So we've got Marvin Bagley first with Sacramento.
Yes, I think he will be starting by the end of the year. And he, real quickly, I've been so impressed by him. He might be the guy who's impressed me the most compared to where I thought he was after Summer League. He looks fluid. He looks explosive. That second jump's ridiculous. He even one-on-one contested Jokic at the rim and blocked him on a play. I just think he looks great, David.
As far as all-around highlights go, he looks really good. That second jump is just, we noted it when we were talking about the draft.
Sure.
It's just ridiculous. It's clearly his best trait. So if he can be a high-energy guy at the 4 or the 5, they've obviously got some rotation issues at the moment, but I definitely agree with you that he'd probably find himself...
Yeah, my comp for him before the draft was like a hyper, super duper crazy athletic Anderson Varejao.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what he's doing so far.
Yep, and I think you're right. He'll be in the starting lineup by the end of the year. How about Mo Bamba?
That's an interesting one because Nikola Vucevic has been really, really good to start the season, but I could also see them trading him. So I think that if they trade him, he'll do it. Do I think they will trade him or not? Or, also they could just start tanking if they're bad towards the end. So, yeah, you know what? I'll go ahead and say Bamba, I think he'll be in the lineup. He's been pretty good. Defensively, he's been awesome. Offensively, he's been bad. but defensively he's been really, really good.
Yeah, I think we could see them in a position where it makes sense to start him, and this next guy, to me, makes exactly the same sense as well, and that's Colin Sexton in Cleveland, Max.
That team just sucks so much that they're going to tank. They're probably going to trade, whatever guys they can trade that teams might want to contend with, like maybe a George Hill or Kevin Love even. But I think that just kind of out of a tanking necessity, that's going to be something that happens.
Yep, unfortunately this guy got injured very early on, Kevin Knox with the Knicks.
Again, it's just a bad team, so probably.
And our guy, number 10, and probably someone we might want to see in the starting unit by the end of the year, Mikal Bridges, Max.
Yep, I think so. The Suns are not going to be good this year, in case you haven't realized that yet. I don't think they're going to outright tank kind of the way they have in the past. They're going to try all year, particularly given the new lottery odds. Like, there's just not a lot of reason just to try to be the worst team you possibly can be. But I do think they're going to give it over to the young guys. I mean, particularly because Mikal Bridges looks like one of the best 5 players in the team. Like, why wouldn't you start him towards the end of the year?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure of the history books on this one, but that's something I'm going to be tracking, Max, because if the whole top 10 are starting by the end of the year, I think that just speaks to what we're touching on here, the strength of the 2018 draft class.
Yeah, it's an incredible class. It really is. Some have exceeded expectations for me. Like, I think Trae Young has been better than I thought right away with his finishing ability that he never really showed before, and he's showing it in the NBA, which is pretty incredible.
Yep.
I'd say a lot of guys are just kind of what I expected. I expected Ayton to be this hyper-productive guy who's lost on defense. I expected Luka to, be the guy who shows incredible feel, but at the same time is horrible on defense because he is exploited. But, these guys are kind of what I expected them to be, but what I expected them to be was great.
Interesting one on Luka. He's playing the highest minutes out of the draft at the moment at 34 per game. And what we touched on pre-draft with him kind of wearing out and looking worse as the Euro season has gone on. And, we've touched on already early in the Dallas last episode that his conditioning doesn't look great, Max. That's going to be something to see. How he wears down over the 82-game season. But, yeah, I agree with you on Trae Young, 39% from 3 and, already 7.5 assists a game. There was that great pass. I'm not sure if you saw the one to Taurean Prince in the corner where they were on the break and Prince wasn't even looking and Young threw it at him. He caught it just in time, hit the 3, and then Young gave him the kind of, always watch me in transition look, which was awesome.
Yeah, Trae Young's going to be so freaking good, dude. I can't believe how good he is already. That 35-point, 11-assist game he had against Cleveland over the weekend, he's just ridiculous, man. I don't know if he's ever going to be a Steph Curry, because no one really is, but I think he could be like Dame Lillard's level of offensive, stardom. He's really good, man.
Yep. He's translated just as well as, you could have hoped, I think, after making that trade and hoping he was going to work out. But moving past the top 10 really quickly here, Max, maybe a chance for us both to toot our own horns again here. I'm going to call this the SGA and Shamet section. So we'll start with SGA because he was taken higher. He's been pretty impressive playing 25 minutes a game for the Clippers, Max.
Yeah, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is good, and those reports about how McD wanted him, wasn't able to get him, those sting a bit right now. I love Mikal, but it does sting considering how much we need a point guard.
Yeah, definitely agree, and who knows with those rumors, but maybe they weren't prepared to put a rookie next to Devin Booker, and with how much Booker wants to move forward, but looking bad right here, right now, if that was something that was on the cards. But talk to me about your boy Landry. Come on.
So listen, it'd be easier for me to gloat if he were playing better. He's been pretty mediocre when he's in the game, but the fact that he's I think he was the 26th overall pick, and he's starting games this early in his career, out of necessity, but still, he's playing significant minutes even when he's not starting. Like, listen, there's a reason why I like the guy so much. The guy he's an incredible shooter. He's a crazy good shooter. And his size, he's not a small guy, allows him to play defense. And I think that's maybe been the most encouraging thing about him. When I talk to smart 76ers fans on Twitter, that's what they're most encouraged about, is the fact that he looks like he can not get destroyed on defense, which is really the kind of what people are worried about because of how slight he is. If he can keep playing okay defense and he shoots, he'll have minutes in the NBA. He'll be a player for a long time. And, for a 26 overall pick, that's great. I had him as 10th, so he's going to have to be pretty damn good to live up to 10th. But it's a nice start.
Yeah, I think it's a good point by you, particularly with such a small sample size. even if he is struggling, it's more the fact that they have put him in the starting lineup out of necessity. That shows that in practice, in pre-season, he impressed the coaches, and they've got the trust in him to put him out there. So I'm looking forward to continuing to see him grow. Another guy who started is Okogie in Minnesota. He's been pretty impressive. And Dante DiVincenzo is kind of playing 20 minutes a game, shooting okay for the Bucks, and another good one to see. Bud is kind of trusting him in their lineup as well, Max.
Yeah, he's been pretty decent, and I was really upset about the fact the Suns were about to pick him just because I didn't think it made sense for the Suns to take him particularly, that team. It makes a lot more sense than the Bucks. They could use a guy like him, some shooting, some scoring off the bench. It makes more sense for them. I just thought he was too duplicative of our guys, but yeah, good pick for them. I do want to point out real quick, I just checked my phone, and the Pelicans have come back, and it looks like they're going to beat the Nets now, so I don't want people to yell at me on Twitter. I did see that.
They stay undefeated, which suits the conversation a little bit more, talking about them as being a red-hot starter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Drew Holiday just hit a 17-foot, looks like game winner. There's 2 seconds left, Nets ball, so we'll see. It's already happened by the time you're listening, so it's not interesting. David, anything else for the rookies?
I just wanted to touch on 3 second-rounders very quickly. Guys that are getting early minutes. I'm not going to talk about their games at all, but the fact that Brunson in Dallas, Diallo, as we mentioned before, with the Thunder, and my guy Svi with the Lakers are all playing pretty significant minutes early on, which is pretty cool to see with your second-round guys so early in their rookie seasons. Those guys always stand out to me, that they've found themselves a role. Generally with those second-rounders, it's because they do one thing very, very well, Max, and you just got to get on the court and improve the rest.
I have 2 responses to that. One of them is that Shvi, your guy, is like everyone's guy now. Everyone loves that guy. I think the GM poll was like raving about him, about how he's like the most underrated rookie or something.
Do I get to do the hipster thing of saying, I liked him before everyone else did?
Yes, of course you do. That's the whole point of having a podcast, David. And the other thing I'll say is that I really hope that the next name on that list of second rounders who are making an impact is either Elie Okobo or Deandre Melton, because that would really help our team.
That's a great way to end talking about the draft, and we've seen them mostly inactive at the moment and switching between places on active and inactive, and both of them have played pretty much junk time, other than Okobo played I suppose a solid 7 minutes early in the game versus Dallas. But interesting one to watch. I'm still hopeful of both of them, probably Melton more than Okobo as a starter going forward. But yeah, hopefully we get to see him on the court soon, Max.
Well, David, the Suns are really bad at defense, as we discussed, and Deandre Melton was one of the best defensive guard prospects we've seen in years. So maybe you should play that guy.
I know I wasn't too hard on Igor in your rotations bit, but yeah, if by the end of the year, or not even the end, if in 15 games time we're still complaining about a lot of these same problems, and Bridges and Melton aren't finding themselves on the court, particularly after impressing in really short stints, I'll join you in ranting a little bit more, Max.
Well, here's my olive branch to you, David. I trust Igor enough that I don't think that's going to happen. I'd be surprised.
I would too.
But let's go ahead and move on to 7 seconds or less. This is the segment where one of us asks the other 3 questions for which the other only has 7 seconds or less to respond. David, I think it's your turn to ask me, right?
It is, and I'll start with an easy one. We have 4 games next week, I'm calling it, Max, probably before our next pod. So just give me an instant win-loss on these. We've played first at Memphis.
Loss, no Booker.
At OKC.
Loss, OKC really needs it.
At home versus the Spurs.
I'm going to give us an upset win there.
Ooh, and at home versus Toronto.
That was my answer.
Okay, I'm taking that as a loss, which I think puts us at 2-6, which is better than 1-7 if we do manage to pick up at least one win there. And
yes, that is better than 1-7. That's true.
But not too dissimilar to what we predicted early on with this tough schedule, and maybe it's more. Hopefully, next pod we're talking about more competitive losses than some of the blowouts we saw last week, Max. But number 2 here. After 4 games, Booker's had performances of 35, 25, 28, and 23. As we said, Max, been very efficient and very impressive. So I've got to ask, what will his season high and season low be?
Oh, wow. Interesting. I think he'll have a game where he scores like 50, 2 or 3. I think he's going to have a huge scoring game at some point. His low, it's tough because you're worried about games where he comes out for injury or whatever, but I think he's at the point now where he's just such a good scorer. It's hard for me to see him scoring under 20 unless there's like a disaster blowout. This is over 7 seconds. I'll just say something. I'll say 15 in like some like weird game where there's some reason why.
Yeah, I think, discounting injury and maybe foul trouble, well, we should probably count foul trouble, but, we've seen even early on he's getting to the line quite a lot when the shot's not working for him as much. So, yeah, I agree. It's going to be hard to see him score under 20 this season with that added to his game. But number 3 here, I've asked this 1,000 times before with Bender's option coming up, so I am not going to ask you again because I think we probably agree by now on what the Suns are actually going to do. So let's assume they're going to decline it, and that is a tad under $6 million in space for next season. So talking about some of our issues and things here, Max, give me an under-the-radar guy that the Suns might make a play for with that kind of money next off-season that would be a perfect fit for the team.
I really wish you would have asked me if they were going to pick up his option or not, so I could have done another laughing answer.
I'll edit your other answer in.
Yeah. I don't know if this counts as a under-the-radar guy because he's extremely good, but I still think he's underrated by casual fans. I mean, they should do everything they can to try to get Chris Middleton. He'd be incredibly awesome on this team, in my opinion. I think he's kind of what you want next to Booker. If Booker's going to be sort of the playmaking guy. I don't think Milwaukee's going to let him go because he's awesome. He's clearly their second best player. But in terms of under the radar guy that people aren't talking about a lot, I think that's probably the guy I'd mention.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I was kind of going, one of two ways with that question, whether you just spend $6 million on a role player when the money kind of dries up next off season. They're kind of harder to pick at this stage in time. But yeah, as far as an under the radar at the kind of, big max money goes, $6 million's a lot of money when you're throwing.
Oh yeah, my bad. I thought you were asking like the aggregate of having the extra $6 million on top. If you're asking about who we should get for like $6 million, man, I don't even know who the fuck those free agents are yet.
I like your answer better.
Cool. Well, that was fun, David. Thanks. That's the end, right? There's nothing else. Is there, David?
That's it.
We went over pretty much everything. You can follow me at MaxMCC11 on Twitter. You can follow David at The 4 Point Play on Twitter. You can follow our podcast at 7SOL Pod on Twitter. Please, as always, rate, review, and subscribe, especially review. We could use some more reviews, David. Reviews are good.
Yeah, it's good to see the listens and downloads trending up as basketball's come back, Max. We all kind of wanted basketball back, and we're excited to have it back. Hopefully the Suns can deliver with the on-court product a little bit more. But if you are listening and haven't reviewed, please do. It helps us out a lot. And until next week, Max.
Until next week. Thanks, David. Thanks, guys.